and welcome to another Spirit of Nature art video tutorial, and we are back with the Botanicals folio. Today we are focusing on this little waterfall and also, first of all, the little file folder that is going to go in this space just here. So I am using some more offcuts of my file folder here, and I am just putting it in place to get some measurements. I don't measure, you guys will know by now. I just put things in place and just kind of cut them to fit that size. So apologies for those of you who like to ask for measurements, but I'm not very good at it. If I was to give you measurements, they would be wrong. So you can see what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of lining this up in place. This is where I want it to go, and just trimming this down to the size that I want it to be. So I just want this kind of extra little file folder to sit in this space here. So I'm using my corner rounder as well, and that black one that I'm using there is a scorer, not a trimmer. So you can see once I got that size, I was able to score that middle line, and now I'm just going to go back in and trim off the excess. So when you see me using this trimmer here, the black little nodge is the scorer, and the pink nodge, if that's a real word, is the trimmer. So I'm just creating this lovely little mini file folder that will sit here, as you can see. So now it's time to decorate. So I'm going to do my usual thing. I've got my tea dye and my vintage photo and my ground espresso distress oxides. Starting off with the tea dye, coming in now with the vintage photo, and I'm really bringing this in to the center, making sure I'm doing the edges as well and that spine. But I want to bring these colours all the way into the middle, so I'm coming back now with the tea dye and using that to kind of blend things in, because I want all of that file folder colour to disappear. So I've just squirted some water on and letting that distress oxide do its kind of magic, and dabbing off with a kitchen towel so we can start to see the oxidization happening. And going in with the ground espresso, a real light touch just around the edge there. And I wanted to bring in an extra colour. So this is Salvaged Patina Oxide, and I've just smooshed a bit onto my mat there, and I put some water on it, and I'm splashing it on with my paintbrush. And I've done the same on the inside. So now I'm just wanting to add some details with some stamping here. This is the lovely Tim Holtz Field Note stamp set, which I've been using throughout the project, and this is vintage photo. And I'm sticking with the oxides, because the colours obviously all kind of match all the way through, but also you just get that, it's not quite as crisp a finish with the oxides when you're stamping, which is nice when you're doing something that you want to feel that's quite vintage like this. As it dries, it kind of settles into the page a little bit and has that slightly kind of fuzzy edge to it. So I'm just going in with some more stamping here, just creating a bit of background for me to work on. Because I already have an idea of what I want to do on here, which is to bring in a focal image, that beautiful butterfly that you would have seen in the thumbnail from one of my vintage wildlife books. So I'm just creating a bit of a place for that butterfly to sit. So here's the page I had in mind, and I really like this one here with a bit of blue on it. I thought it just adds a little pop of colour to the whole project. And I've got a whole stash here of labels. Some of these are Tracie Fox labels, some of these are some Tim Holtz ephemera. So I'm just kind of, you know, emptied my stash out on the side there, and just going through and pulling a few bits out. And I've distressed them in the same way as I do everything else. So we have some inking around the edge, but I've also smooshed them with a bit of the bundled sage. And now just looking at how I want this all to fit together. No magic formula, it's just what looks and feels right. And honestly, this is only a tiny bit of the faffing that you saw me doing. I edited out loads of faffing. And what I want to do now I've got it in the right place, I kind of want to just sort of hold it in place a little bit rather than take it all apart and then try and stick it back in the perfect place again. So I'm just kind of holding it there and adding a little bit of glue to the places where everything touches so that I can keep it in that place before I stick it down properly. There. So now I have it stuck together like one piece, and it's easier now for me to be able to stick that into place. So now I want to turn my attention to the inside of this little folder, which you'll see I've already done a little bit of stamping on. But I want to put some more detail in the middle, and I want to get rid of that shiny bit of reinforcement on that folder there. So I pulled out some more book pages. I like these ones with the Beatles on. So colourful and lots of interest on them. I've kind of decided I'm going to go with this one that feels a little bit more like an anatomy piece. So I'm just going to, as you can see, I've already put some tea dye on using my blending tool, and now I've smooshed some tea dye on as well. And once that's dry, adding in a little bit of stamping. Again, with everything in this folio, part of the thing that we get that sense of age, something that's been around for a while, is all the layers that build up as we use things. And I've decided I want to turn this into a bit of a pocket. So there's that rather handy line there that I thought if I fold along that line, it will give me a stronger edge to that pocket. And rather than just covering up that flap, I actually end up with a little tuck spot to put something in. So I'm just kind of lining that up and seeing where I want to put that, and then flipping it over and drawing around it so I can make sure I get all the bits in that I want. I don't want to accidentally cut part of that beetle off. So I've cut that out, and I'm just edging that now with some vintage photo. And I'm just going to put a very tiny bead of glue along those three edges because I want to keep that pocket as big as possible. So I don't want too much glue smooshing out and sticking too much of it down. So I've not put any glue along that long straight edge so that we can tuck things in behind it. And now just adding a few more bits of stamping. Bringing in the red, that's barn door, I think. I don't want to overdo those kind of colours, but it's nice to have a little bit. So I'm now just measuring up to make a little tag to go inside that pocket. So again, just kind of putting things in place and measuring it up and seeing what fits. So just cut a little tag shape, and now I'm going to use that more colourful piece of paper from that book, and the usual thing, going in with a little bit of tea dye just to age the page, smooshing a bit on, and then I'm literally just going to stick that in place with my glue stick, cut around it, and then I've already vintage photoed around the edge, and I'm now just going back in with that tiny, tiny light touch of ground espresso. I'm just deciding how I want to use this stamp. This stamp sort of almost has like two parts to it, so I've rubbed off the ink off the bottom part, so I only get the top bit. And now I am just going in with my hole punch and putting an eyelet in there. So that it fits in like that. So now I want to do a little notebook on this other side here, a little bit like the one we did I can't remember what episode, but so I've got some tea dyed paper here and I'm just putting it in place and creating like a template piece there, the right size, and then I've got a whole load here there that I'm just going to do the same thing to. So I've got like a little notebook here. And I'm just going to, one of the few times that I use my measuring tool, just to pop a little mark there at even spaces from the inside of, from the outside of that notebook. And then I'm just going in with my hole punch to punch some holes there so that I can put some brads through to hold that paper in place. Really simple way to create a little notebook without too much fuss. And just pushing those brads down, and here we go, little notebook. And this is where I want it to sit, and I want to create a little bit of a pocket out of it as well, so there'll be a tuck space behind it too. So now just thinking about those bits of that kind of flap there that will be visible, and starting to decorate those in the same way as I have everything else. So it'll be no surprise that the tea dye and the vintage photo are coming out. But I'm just going to do those bits that are poking out. There's no need to do the whole thing because the little file folder will stick in front of it. So you'll see I've already done the kind of splashed a bit of water on there to get it oxidized, and I'm now just adding a little bit of stamping in those areas that peek out. Again, just bringing that red in, a small touch of red, but mostly using the vintage photo. Just bringing in a few more of those little labels. Again, just so, you know, if it's on the front cover of that little folio there, I also want it on that page because it just kind of connects everything together. So just sticking those in place. As you can see, this is how I do my little collages. I stick them together first before I then stick them down to the page. So now creating the pocket out of this little folio. So I'm just going to glue some of this down. So this bottom part's going to be completely stuck down, and then I'm just putting that little bead of glue along that back edge there so that when that sticks down, there'll be a tuck spot behind that top right hand corner. A little bit of Tim Holtz ephemera, I think, from the Field Notes kit. Just giving that a little edge, and you'll see, oh yeah, giving it a bit of a smoosh as well. Why not? To match everything else. And that will just tuck nicely in that spot there. So now it's time to turn attention to this spot here, and I want to create a little mini waterfall. Nothing too big because I don't want to add too much extra bulk. So I'm just marking up the width that I want my waterfall to be. And I'm also just going to create just a little tiny template here. I'm just kind of creating the size that I want the finished kind of visible bit of flap to be, so that I can just check how that is going to sit. I don't want the waterfall to come down below the mini folder on the other side. Now what I want to do is to create the waterfall. I'm going to use that template to create some little cards that have got an extra bit of size on it, so that I can then score, fold that, and create that little card there. So I have my 3 little waterfall cards now. I'm just going to burnish that fold because I want them to sit quite flat when they're finished. So they're going to sit here like that. So only 3 because I don't want to add bulk beyond where that mini journal starts, because those 2 pages will fold in together. And I'm also just kind of sizing up these little squares here, because I want to create these little specimen folders here. So I've just cut out some little squares here that will create my little specimen slides. And now I want to cut the window out of them. So I'm just using my cutting mat here to measure out the size of the window. So I'm leaving a double width at the bottom, and then the rest of those three sides are single width around, and I'm just cutting that out with my craft knife so that what was just little squares of card now become little specimen slides, like this. And those little slides will sit on the little waterfall flaps like that. So, time to get the distress inks out. So, usual treatment, some tea dye and some vintage photo, a little bit of smooshing, and also some stamping on these as well. I want to get all of that done before I add the little acetate window. So again, just using the Tim Holtz Field Notes stamp set. And the stamp that is the script stamp, that's a little paper artsy mini stamp. Again, you can see how all these layers of inks and stamping start to really create something that looks like it's been around for a long time, rather than, you can see the little waterfall flaps up in the top right corner there, which haven't had anything done to them yet. They look like bits of modern card, and you can see how quickly that disappears as we start to work with them. Just taking a look at how they are going to sit. I was wondering about whether I should make a little tuck spot out of them, but I'm not sure I will. I think there's enough detail in them as there is, and I don't want to add more bulk. And because I don't want to add more bulk, rather than using a thick acetate, I'm just cutting out some of the clear packaging from some stencils. So this doesn't need to be anything that's structural, so this will work just fine. So I'm just cutting a little bit out, and then I am adding again a really tiny bit of glue and keeping it as far away from the edge of the frame as possible, the inside edge of the frame, because what I don't want is for that all to squish out on the acetate when I stick it down. So I'm just placing that on the plastic packaging, giving it a light touch so that we get those little windows in. So now I'm turning my attention to the actual waterfall flaps. So again, usual thing, tea dye, vintage photo. Paying particular attention to those spines there. You'll see I have done the splashing with the water, let that dry. Now I'm adding in that little kind of light touch of ground espresso. Everything is going to match. I'm just cutting out here the acetate, so cutting off that spare acetate so you can see these little windows that will sit on those flaps like little mini slides, like that. And I want to add just a little bit more kind of detail, so I'm going to put some brads in the top corners. So I'm just using my pokey tool just to create a really teeny tiny hole so that I can stick these brads through. It just adds another level of detail, another texture that just helps to bring these little slides to life and takes them even further away from a little bit of card that I cut out. As usual, my brad legs are too long, so I'm just trimming them off with a wire cutter and pushing them down just to make sure they're as flat as possible, just to make my job of sticking them on as easy as I can. And now I'm just going to audition some butterflies from my my vintage book pages, just to see which ones are going to fit really well in those slide windows. So I've chosen my 3, and you'll see how they fit there. And just sticking those in place with a bit of glue like that, so we end up with what looks like these beautiful old specimen slides. And they will sit on the waterfall flaps like this. So you can see there is some space for us to do some decorating. So I have got out my trusty Tracie Fox labels here and have chosen some and created some little kind of mini collages there, which I'm just gonna age those labels with some vintage photo. They've had a bit of smooshing as well. There we go. And adding in some stamping in the background before I stick everything down. Just seeing where those kind of blank spaces are going to be, but also not just putting the stamps in the blank places, but in those places where things overlap. Again, it's that layering effect that gives us that kind of more authentic, aged, used feel. And then just getting everything stuck down. Again, just sticking things to each other first. And now I can stick that down as one piece. Once I've done just a little bit more stamping. You see how actually it's quite helpful to be able to stick it all together like that, because then I can move it around and see where the stamping goes, see what's missing as one piece, rather than constantly having to try and put it back together in the same position again, which is never going to happen. And just bringing in a little bit of red onto each slide. And then ready to stick it down. And then I'm going to repeat that process with all of the slides. But before I do, I want to add a little tab onto each slide to make it onto each flap to make it easier to lift it up, but also those little tabs are an invitation to move things and lift things, aren't they? So I'm just adding a little tab there that I cut out using my Cricut, and I have aged it, and I'm going to add a little stamp to it as well. Why not? And here they are, the 3 pieces. So I've already stuck them to that first little bit of card that we cut out, so I'm only having to stick this down once. So, and I've also, as you can see, I've backed them with a bit of tea dye paper as well, just to create those lovely journal spots. So here we go. I love how this has turned out. It's so cute. I love doing a waterfall, but it's nice to be able to put a small little one in this journal here. So here's where we've got to. Here's our little mini file folder, our little mini journal there, our little tuck spot with lots of little things tucked behind it. We've got our belly band over on this side, and then when we open up, we've got all these little tuck spots and journaling card spaces over here. And then when we open up, we have got this really cute little waterfall. We have got our bigger little journal card here that slides in and out. And we've got our little mini journal over here as well. So that is the inside finished. So I do hope you'll join me next time where we'll be looking at the covers front and back. This might be the final episode, fingers crossed. I will see you soon.